Patreon.com/the Walk-Off Podcast. $4 a month gets you in there.
So thrilled to have returning to the show one half of the podcast at the letters and Blue Jays insider for Sportsnet, Arden Zwelling. Welcome back to the Walk-Off, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Buddy, before we even start, just a big congratulations in order here on your new position down on the field with Hazel and the players. I know I watched you doing that over the playoff run there. And buddy, very exciting to see that become a permanent thing, man. Congrats.
Yeah, thank you. It's awesome. I am thrilled, to say the least. Incredibly excited. The hardest part since I sort of found out has been just waiting for spring training to begin. And then now that's begun, it's waiting for Grapefruit League games to begin. And then
yeah, that's right.
Regular season games to begin. So the waiting is the hardest part. But thank you very much. It's awesome.
How was your off season? What do you wind up doing when baseball season's not taking up all your time?
It was good, man. I had the opportunity to, right after the wild card series, like you said, I went straight into the playoff coverage. So I was on the NL side for TV there, which is like an awesome experience, just getting to see the atmospheres in San Diego and at Dodger Stadium and in Philly as well. I mean, those games were so intense, and getting to see Bryce Harper up close and Manny Machado doing his thing and just getting to kind of be there. The atmosphere in San Diego in particular was like really, really special. So that, it didn't feel like work, even though it was. It was awesome. And then, from there, just kind of tried to check out a bit over the off season and kind of unwind and de-stress a little bit and rest up, man, recuperate and get ready for another grind, which is about to begin right now.
You're good to go though, eh?
Ready to go. As ready as
ready to go.
As ready as I'm gonna be. Ready
as you're gonna be.
Yeah, ready to see what this team's gonna give us.
So let's start with that. Let's start with this team. We'll ease in with a nice broad question. Obviously, some major changes have taken place over the offseason, and truly the makeup of this team is substantially different from last year. Brandon Belt, Dalton Varsho coming in, providing that legit left-handed bats in the lineup. Kevin Kiermaier being added with Varsho, so the defense improves greatly in the outfield. What are your general thoughts on what the Blue Jays have done? And if you were to give it a letter grade to this point, what are you ranking this offseason?
Well, it's interesting because we look back at off seasons and we think that there was this master plan and that the Blue Jays executed everything exactly the way that they would have, but we know they didn't
had a checklist.
Yeah, we know they didn't have their ideal off season, right? Like we know they didn't do exactly what they would have done if they had their druthers, because you don't know where your opportunities are going to be, which free agents are going to be available to you, how much money you have to work with, who will take your money, who wants to come to your market, who can come to your market, what trade opportunities you have, like what injury stuff you run into. Like so much of it's out of your control, right? So much of it is just responding and reacting and having plan B, C, D, E, F, G, like all of these sort of off roads that you can take and different avenues you can take. So I think the Blue Jays, by working their way through that, found their way to being a more balanced team, a more versatile team, obviously more left-handed hitters in the lineup, a deeper team on the pitching side, certainly when you layer in Chris Bassett and Eric Swanson, and a much improved, I would say, defensive and base running team, which are not necessarily the first two things that we point to or that we look at when we really assess how a team is different from year to year. But I think two things that are going to be impactful for this club. So it's just going to be really interesting to see how this all coalesces and comes together over the next 6, 7, 8 months.
So Bob Nightingale reporting over the weekend that Manny Machado reportedly seeking 10 years, $400 million in next offseason. He's obviously planning on opting out of his contract with San Diego, and why wouldn't he? Which, as you look at the free agent market for third baseman, it's pretty hard not to look at Matt Chapman and think this could line up for him absolutely beautifully. He seems to kind of slot in as that number 2 best option at third base available on the market after Machado. Any guess on what the Chapman market could look like next off season? It feels like the stars are kind of aligning for the guy right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he would prefer that Manny Machado comes to terms with on an extension with the
Yeah, right.
Padres, and then he's just the number one third baseman and by far the best third baseman available, right? In free agency, you don't want teams to have options. You want
Mhm.
teams to be very limited. But even if, and I mean, Machado will opt out. So really it's just, does he, do they come to terms on an extension or not? Even if Machado's on that market, Matt Chapman's going to be, I mean, very attractive to a lot of clubs, assuming that he continues to have the sort of seasons that he has been having. And I don't think there's any reason to expect him not to. Is he going to be quite the offensive force that he was pre-hip surgery in Oakland? I mean, I don't know. We'll see if he can get back to those heights. I think he was tremendously unlucky last year. I think you can look at some of the quality of contact that he made and the loud outs that he ran into and see his year looking a lot better if some of that luck went his way. He also was rung up on pitches outside the strike zone a ton last year. He is so patient at the plate, so just hesitant, I guess, or so. I mean, he just refuses to expand his strike zone, right? Like, so reticent to do that. He makes great swing decisions. So when you've got a guy who makes really good swing decisions, doesn't chase, swings the pitches on the plate, and then when he does swing, makes really strong contact like Matt Chapman does and hits the ball really hard, puts it in play at a really high rate of speed. Those are process indicators that I am always going to bet on. So if Matt Chapman continues to do that, you should continue to be an offensive force. I think the defense speaks for itself. I don't think there's anything left to be said about the quality of play that Matt Chapman brings at third base. So if all that continues, yeah, you're looking at him thinking of comps on the free agent market as like Marcus Semien,
Yeah.
or Chris Bryant, right? 6-7 years, 170, 180 million dollars. That's what Matt Chapman could be looking at as a free agent.
Are the Blue Jays in on him at that price? I mean, obviously, this is a crystal ball question. So, in your
February
opinion,
20th, man.
yeah,
Like, we'll see what happens over the next. This is gonna be like the needlessly hyperbolic headline that you put on this, right? Sportsnet analyst says that whatever. Here's why you should panic. My dumb head, like
like
this,
and subscribe. Right? Yes.
Yeah, is that what's this is what you're setting me up for? Really? I smell a trap with that question.
No traps, no trap. Don't answer it.
You've already got the title picked out and the big block letters.
The thumbnails have been made days in advance. Yes.
If the Blue Jays don't re-sign Matt Chapman, you should set everything in your house on fire. Yeah, we'll see. Let's see what happens over the next several months.
Addison Barger looks ripped, eh? This is out of left field, but like, if there are third baseman options out there, he's definitely more ripped than I was expecting.
Turns that are happening here are wild. Yeah, I haven't been down there, but yeah, he's a guy who clearly takes his strength and conditioning very seriously. I mean, I think at this time of year, everybody is in the best shape that they can be because nobody's played baseball for several months and nobody's had to deal with the travel and the stress and the lack of sleep and like the lack of proper nutrition. Everyone's just had these 2, 3, 4 months, whatever it was, to really hone in and dial in on that stuff. And as professional athletes, like, have the resources and the time and the know-how to really focus on getting your body prepared. So I think everybody is looking a lot better physically now than they did at the end of last season.
Full of hope. Yeah.
And and within 5-6 months of travel and stress and cardiovascular demands and CNS demands and being on your feet every night for 3.5 hours, they're gonna look a lot worse than they do now.
So, Arden, I'm curious your opinion on Hyun Jin Ryu. According to reports, his rehab process is coming along nicely, and he could be back with the team as early as July. Now, there are people who are counting on him coming back and stepping in like it's 2020. There's people who say he's cooked and his career's done. There's people who think he's going to come back but not until 2024. What are your thoughts on Hyun Jin Ryu? And do you think that the front office is counting on him contributing at all in 2023?
If you're the Blue Jays, you take what you can get at this point with him coming off Tommy John surgery. Everybody recovers differently. I think it can take a bit longer for starters than relievers, certainly, just because of the workload demand on the other end of it. And if you're rejoining a rotation and looking to go 5 innings and throw 80 to 100 pitches, I mean, that's a different level of stress on your arm than if you're a reliever and you're coming in to throw 15 to 20 pitches over an inning, right? So like it's really going to depend on how he recovers, how the ball's coming out when he actually starts throwing at like a high intensity again. I'm sure he's somewhere in his throwing progression right now where he's doing some work probably on flat ground, I would imagine. I really don't know. Like I haven't checked in on where his rehab's at right now, but the big step is like when you get on a mound and start, letting loose and seeing where your velocity's at, where your movement's at, and like how does it feel to pronate again, and like how does your elbow respond to the increases in intensity and stress. So it's really just going to depend on how that all goes when he really starts ramping up towards the, I imagine, 11-12 month mark of his rehab.
Even the contribution to the Blue Jays aside, I don't know what it is about Ryu. I'm so curious as to see how the back end of his career plays out. He's 35 now, coming off of Tommy John. Could he wind up with the Rays on a $4 million contract in 2024 and being a top 10 Cy Young pitcher? Like, he's got the acumen within him to do that. He also could just wind up being a guy that, maybe this is it. He goes back to Korea. Who knows? Like, I'm just so curious to see where things play out with him.
Well, never a guy that relied on velocity, right? So
Right? Yeah.
it's not like when he comes back, he needs to be 95, 96, right? I mean, when he was effective with a 90, 91 mile per hour fastball. So if the velo is there, the control and command is there, the action and movement on his pitches are there. I mean, it's asking a lot at his age, coming off Tommy John surgery, right?
It
There's just so
is.
much uncertainty. I would be really uncomfortable trying to like forecast anything in any direction.
Yeah.
With him, right? Like no outcome would honestly surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me if he came back and is Hyun Jin Ryu again, like the guy that we saw before.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't surprise me if he's done pitching in MLB. Like either
Yeah.
way, I could believe any of those outcomes because it's just such a long rehab, and we've seen so many different athletes return from it in different ways. So we'll see. It's one of those impossible things to say as we sit here right now in February.
Yeah, no, truly. So let's go the other side and talk Ryu's mentee, if you will. Alec Manoa has taken positive steps forward in every aspect of his career since he's been a pro ball player, basically. And I know I was reading some excerpts of an interview he had with Scotty Mitchell of TSN yesterday. And he was asked his biggest takeaways from the playoff loss, his first playoff game, wildcard game 1. And the maturity in how much he thought about it was really impressive to me, because he kind of mentioned that he had watched the first inning of that game where he gave up the 4 runs more than any piece of television he's ever watched in his entire life. And he talked about just the 2 times he hit J-Rod, and just that he didn't want to, he knows that he's one of the guys that hits the most batters in baseball, and he likes that aggressiveness, and he thinks that can be an advantage, but he also is cognizant that there's a time and a place, and maybe that in a playoff game, a little bit more focus and maybe not shying away from going inside, but just being aware of it is something that he needs to work on. I was really impressed with just the way that he put so much time into analyzing what went on. I know obviously projections, and why wouldn't they project a little bit less out of Alec this year? He did so well in 2022. It's kind of a smart move to do, but they're projecting him not pitching quite as well in 2023. I'm curious what your thoughts are on what fans can reasonably expect out of Alec Manoa this season.
Well, there's a fine line there, right, between accountability and wanting to sort of learn from things that have happened to yourself, and then dwelling on the other side too, right? So you don't want to be obsessive over failure, but you certainly want to find a way to learn from it. And I do trust that Alec Manoa is someone who is going to get better from that experience in game one of the wild card series there, when really, I mean, it was one bad inning and it was a bad
It
inning.
was, yeah.
Right. It wasn't like he, had a meltdown out. Like he came back, right. And found a way to give his team some innings and to at least keep that game close. The problem was like Luis Castillo was having the night of his life on the other side. So,
Yeah.
I mean, Alec Manoa could have given up 2 runs, and I think the Blue Jays are probably losing that game because like Luis Castillo was just that good on the night. But yeah, I do trust Alec Manoa will find ways to grow from that and to improve because he is like very driven, and he does care like a lot about his career, and he understands how far he has come from rather humble beginnings, and he understands like how high his ceiling is as an MLB pitcher. So yeah, he's I think the quote that he gave Shai Davidi in his piece was something like, unless you like go 31-0, you've got stuff to improve on, right?
Yeah.
So that's a good mentality to be constantly trying to get better. I think that's why he works as hard as he does. So yeah, realistic expectations. I don't know. I'd probably point to like whatever the Zips projection is probably like
Yeah.
realistic. I don't have in front of me, but yeah, I mean, I think that we've seen what Alec Manoa is at the big league level right now. We've seen that he's capable of getting up to 200 innings. We've seen that he's capable of an ERA well below 3. He's capable of contending for a Cy Young award. So, given health, I think that he's capable of that.
So we had Hagen Danner, Haggy D, on the show about a month ago, and he was talking about his rehab last season, just missing most of that AAA season, and then how well he played in the Arizona Fall League. And he was just mentioning to Adam and I how he really felt like this was his year to make an impact on the Toronto Blue Jays, and his confidence that he could do that and be a legitimate piece in the bullpen, kind of, it gave us confidence too, right? When there's a guy who just seems like he's ready and he's fired up to make a contribution. So I actually believe he is going to impact the Blue Jays this year. I'm curious if you had to pick one guy within the organization that is yet to play in the big leagues and contribute to the big club to actually join in and make a contribution. What name should we have our eyes on?
It's funny that you say, yeah, you feel like this is the year that Hagen Danner impacts the Blue Jays. I would have said that last year, honestly,
Yeah.
when he was added to the 40 over the like last off season, and then just unfortunately had the elbow issues. But I mean, looked good in the spring, looked good in early April, and then just crazy, just disappeared, just ended up missing the year, and then resurfaced in the Arizona Fall League, like sitting 98, and
Yeah.
blowing like power sliders past guys, and it was like, whoa. So like yeah, I think Hagen Danner is an obvious name. You mentioned Addison Barger, Spencer Horwitz maybe is a
Yeah.
guy. I think Yosfer Zulueta pitches for the Blue Jays this year. He's on the 40 man. I think he would have pitched for the Blue Jays last year as well, honestly, if he didn't run into some knee and shoulder issues. The question right now will be like, is that kind of out of the rotation or in relief? Blue Jays are stretching him out in spring training as they should, because he has a starter's body and a starter's repertoire. So you never give up on that. And if you can go to AAA and be in the zone and throwing strikes and like getting the swing and miss with some pretty electric stuff, like you might have something on your hands there. But if the command isn't there, or if there's a really pressing need in the bullpen, maybe Zulueta is a guy out of the bullpen. Adrian Hernandez, another reliever who I expect to pitch for the Blue Jays, the changeup specialist, who has whose changeup is a legit big league pitch, bat missing pitch, profiles really well. There's just question about the fastball and whether the fastball can play at the big league level and whether you can survive in the big leagues with really only a changeup as your really legitimate above average weapon. I mean, the Blue Jays have been working so hard with Adrian Hernandez just to get a bit more velo on the fastball and doing some strength and conditioning stuff with him. He's just not the biggest guy naturally, doesn't have the biggest frame, so I'm sure there's only so much that they can really do there. But if they can get the fastball velo up a little bit, I do think that he's going to be a real weapon for them out of the bullpen. So those are kind of the names that come to mind right now. I guess those are all the 40-man guys, but like having that, or Hernandez might not be on the 40, but Zulueta and Danner certainly on the 40. Hayden Younger, another name. That's another guy who I think you could see pitch for the Blue Jays this year in a bit of a, not like a 1 inning relief role, but like a 6, 7, 8, 9 batter relief role. You know what I mean?
Oh,
like
really? Okay.
Take a trip through the lineup sort of deal. That is a role that's going to be really important in the game in coming years. And I think the teams are really going to start utilizing that one trip through reliever a lot more going forward. And I think the Blue Jays are trying to actually develop it with Hayden Younger and with some of the other players in their system. I bet you that guys like Trent Thornton and Thomas Hatch, Nate Pearson fit into that role this year as like a one trip through reliever. And I think the teams are going to be a lot more purposeful with kind of utilizing players in that role. It's not just a reliever coming in to mop up innings and like, hey, we just need some length out of, you know, Casey Lawrence or whoever out of the bullpen today to save our leverage arms. It's like, no, you are purposefully like someone who's going to come in after, say, Yusei Kikuchi takes 2 trips through. Nate Pearson's going to come in and face 9 hitters and take 1 trip through, like, and
still give you a legit chance to come back then. Yeah.
Or even in a game that you're ahead, right? Like, we're going to use you in leverage spots and spots where the game's on the line and try to get you through 9 hitters and see how many outs you're able to convert there. Don't worry about saving anything for a second trip through. Don't worry about having to show different looks or save some gas in the tank. Like, just go out, air it out for 9 hitters and throw your best stuff. I think that guys like Pearson, Younger, Hatch, Thornton, I think that's going to be the way that they're utilized going forward. It's going to be interesting to see how important that is in the game.
Arden, do you think it's safe to say the depth on this team is much better than it was last year, especially when we're talking about guys like Zulu and Danner being healthy now and just another year to guys like Younger and some of these other guys?
I mean, it is better until, you know, Jose Barrios's shoulder is barking and he goes on the IL, and like Alec Manoa takes a comebacker and breaks a bone, and it's like all of a sudden Drew Hutchison's starting, right?
Right. Yeah.
The depth is great as long as everybody.
Depth is great until
until you need it.
Things go wrong.
Yeah, right. And performing as well. Like, I'm sure the Blue Jays felt like they had decent bullpen depth last year as well. But then, you know, some of these names, right? Zulueta, Hernandez, Danner, these are all guys who we expected to impact the Blue Jays last year, and for injuries reasons, like, didn't. So and you can even point to like Nate Pearson. How many years now has he been someone who's going to impact the Blue Jays at the big league level and realize his potential? And he has had just so many lost years. So you know, you try to build out as much depth as you can. It's incredibly important when it comes to relief, but I don't know, you never really know how strong the depth is until you have to test it.
You mentioned stretching out Yosver Zulueta in AAA, maybe the potential to bring him in as a starter. That 5th starter in this rotation is obviously one of the biggest question marks the Blue Jays have. How do you see that playing out in the early phases of the year? Is it a Yusei Kikuchi is going to get some run there, or Mitch White? Is he threatening for the 5th spot? Are we going to platoon really based on matchups?
It's really only your 5th starter for the first week of the season, right? Is what you decide in spring training. And then after that, who knows, right? By 2-3 weeks into the year, the Blue Jays may have used 7 starters, right? Who knows? So it's really only a competition for like who starts the 5th game of the year. And there's even like always that off day in there on the 2nd day of the season. So you don't even technically really need a 5th starter, but you know, teams are still, you're usually being kind of careful with workloads early on and easing guys in, right? So I think that Yusei Kikuchi probably opens the season as the 5th starter, and Mitch White probably opens the season in the bullpen if he's healthy, if he's ready to go. We heard a little bit about a shoulder impingement with him and him being a little bit behind. So we'll see if, just where his readiness is and how he kind of responds to increasing workload and intensity over spring training. But I think Kikuchi out of the gate likely. And then we'll see. I bet you Mitch White's going to make starts for this team. I bet you Drew Hutchison's going to make starts for this team. Zach Thompson's going to make starts for this team. Casey Lawrence is going to make a start at some point this season. I mean, the Blue Jays are going to go deep into their starting depth as every team does.
Besides a healthy season, What do you want to see out of Danny Jansen this season?
I mean, that's the biggest thing is
Yeah.
be healthy, right? Because that's the only thing that has really stopped him from unlocking some of the uh advancements, I guess, that he's made as a hitter. And it's funny to call them advancements. He's really just kind of like stopped trying to change who he is as a hitter, because for so long he was trying to be an all fields guy, and he was trying to say, no, don't just pull the ball, you're going to get shifted and you're going to just roll over into outs. You got to try to go the other way, and I gotta do 15 different drills before the game with dry swings and one-handed things in my hands and my hips and all this stuff. He kind of just threw all that out the window. It was like, look, I'm just a pull hitter. That's just who I am. I pull the ball, and I pull it with authority. And lo and behold, when he just really embraced that and kind of took a lot of that stuff that he was thinking about at the plate out of his mind and just freed himself up and unlocked himself, results followed. And all of a sudden, I mean, he's just barreling the ball to the pull side constantly. So yeah, if he's healthy, I think that Danny Jansen has shown that he's really found something offensively at the plate. And it's like pretty remarkable that the Blue Jays could have two really really sound offensive
Offensive
catchers, right?
catchers. Yeah.
You don't see that all the time, where you have like two guys that could be like 120, 130 WRC plus hitters as catchers.
hmm
That's pretty rare in the game. So yeah, he's just got to stay healthy. That's the biggest thing.
With them moving Gabriel Moreno, obviously he had 6 years of control. Rookie guy. Like, obviously he had all the control in the world. That was what was so appealing to the Diamondbacks, and probably why he wound up being the guy they moved. With Jansen a free agent in 2025, if all goes well for him this year, he puts together a healthy season and continues to look like the guy at the plate that we've seen from May 2021 until the end of last year, is it fair to expect this front office to see what they can do on extending him?
It's still way too early.
It's
Dan,
way
to
too
even
early, eh?
think
Yeah.
about that. Like
Yeah.
when you
And
got,
that's fair. That's very fair.
if you're the Blue Jays, you got 2 more years of control, and I mean, he hardly costs you anything, really,
Anything.
honestly, for
Yeah.
what you get in return, right? Like if you're the Blue Jays going to year, is you're still you're reaping surplus value. It's not a situation where it's like with a Bo Bichette or Vladimir Guerrero Jr. going year to year through arbitration. If those guys are like winning MVPs and stuff, then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, you're still getting surplus value, but you're like the fee is going up quite a bit. With someone like Danny Jansen, I don't think the Blue Jays are too worried about locking in the cost certainty there.
I know you mentioned it a little off the top here, just that the base running has improved so much with the additions from the offseason here. And with the new pitch clock, pickoff attempt / bigger bases rules coming into play, I'm actually excited to kind of see how much this impacts base running in the game in general. Do you think that's an aspect of the game that's going to play into the way the Blue Jays approach this season? And on top of that, do you think that this will be the first year since 2017 we see somebody in MLB grab 50 bases?
I don't know. We'll see. I think base stealing is going to go up a lot. I don't know if I haven't even looked at who had the most steals in baseball last year. Do you have it in front of you?
I can pull it up.
I don't know who it was.
So
I know the number was 45, I think, or something like that.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know about the actual number of 50, but I think that just thinking league wide, the base stealing is going to go up like a lot. I think that you saw that in the minors with the advent of the pitch clock. And so in MLB, you're not only going to have the pitch clock, but you're also going to have larger bases. So there's just like less distance between first and second, and between second and third, it's about 4.5 inches less distance. And with the disengagement rule with pitchers, so with runners on, you can only step off or throw over twice, and then you've got to get the either if you throw over again, it's a balk if the base runner gets back. So I think that there's going to be a lot more base stealing this year. I think you're going to see a lot of base runners even just kind of like faking steals, taking aggressive leads, and like kind of doing those sort of taunt takeoffs, and then darting back, trying to get pitchers to use up their disengagements. But yeah, I don't know if it'll be that much of a difference for like your kind of proven base stealers, like your guys who could steal in 21, 22 baseball as well. I think it's just going to allow more guys who are kind of on that cusp to enter the conversation. So
more stolen bases for Kevin Biggio.
Sure. Yeah. I would even look at a guy like Matt Chapman. I would look at a guy like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Like I think guys like that are going to steal a lot more this year.
All right, I got the list of stolen base leaders here just for the record. John Birdie with 41, Jorge Mateo 35, Cedric Mullins 34, Randy Arozarena with 32.
Yeah. So is John Birdie going to steal 9 more with these new rules? I don't know. I think he was stealing a lot even with the old rules, right? Like I think there's going to
Yeah.
be just more kind of guys like the floor, right? Like I think there's going to be more 20 base stealers, just because there's going to be more guys who feel like they can get away with it.
That's a good point.
I'm kind of excited to see where it goes. I know that it may not impact instantly, but whenever guys are getting, if we watch some guys who are swiping bags, getting paid more, you'll watch more players put attention and detail into stealing bases. Who knows? Some of these young kids coming up, it could be cool to actually see guys who are like being drafted and brought in specifically to steal bases. We haven't seen that in forever.
I think you still got to hit. I think that's going to be
Yeah.
the most important thing to get playing time in MLB. Like Billy Hamilton would have a major league deal right now, right? If teams wanted to bring in guys just to steal bases, you can't steal first base. Unfortunately, is the problem. So you still have to reach in order to utilize that tool. So I still do think that the hit tool is going to be the most important thing.
I like your idea though about the taunting leadoff, like just to try and draw a disengagement out of a pitcher, especially like with the pitch clock being a thing. Maybe he's running low on his pitch clock. He disengages to avoid that penalty. Boom, there's already one. Maybe not for the second time. Vladdy's getting a little bit more aggressive with the lead just to try and draw that second one out. Who knows? I like that idea.
Kevin Kiermaier is going to be a classic guy with this. Yeah. Kevin Kiermaier is going to do that all day long. I promise you. When he's on first base, like the OBP isn't that high with him, so he's got to get to first. But when he's there, he's going to be trying to get in the pitcher's mind at all times. I bet you Whit Merrifield's going to do stuff like that. Dalton Varsho is going to be a guy who's doing stuff like that. Like there is such huge pressure on catchers in 2023 baseball to kind of keep a handle on that, be throwing back picks a lot of back picks to first base just to keep runners close. Like a lot of times you throw a back pick, you're not actually trying to get the guy out. You're just trying to keep him close. You're just trying to cut down that lead and not let him like get that huge secondary so that on a ball in the dirt, it's easier to get to second or to third. So I think the back picks are going to be huge. The other thing with the back pick is it actually delays the amount of time before the pitch timer begins. Pitch clock doesn't start until the ball's in the pitcher's glove. So you throw a back pick and then say the first baseman throws the ball back to the catcher. It's like another, 2-3 seconds that the pitcher gets to recover in between pitches, which like doesn't sound like the biggest thing, but for some guys that could be meaningful. So I think the catchers like stuff like that, stuff with catchers with like getting the
stealing seconds. I love that. Just like taking time where you can.
I think you're going to see it, right? I think teams are going to try to strategize all kinds of different ways to kind of get the most and take advantage of the loopholes in these rules. But I think for catchers, like it's, we think about it, like automated balls and strikes are coming, or robo umps as people call them. Like that's going to happen in MLB at some point, and that's going to like lessen responsibility for catchers when it comes to framing. But I think there is so much more responsibility for catchers right now in terms of game calling, in terms of being on the same page as your pitchers. Like Chris Bassett's a guy who shakes off all the time because he's got like 6-7 pitches depending on the night. You got to be on the same page. You can't have him out there like shaking off, and all of a sudden his 15 seconds in between pitches are gone, and now all of a sudden now you're giving away balls, right? Like you've got to be on the same page, getting that sign in quickly, set up, ready to receive earlier, and while also keeping in mind when there's runners on, like the increased aggressiveness that you're going to see on the base pass that we've been seeing. So I think there's a lot of responsibilities for catchers in 2023.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Speaking of rule changes, I saw that Kevin Gausman was changing his delivery slightly to abide kind of with the new pitch clock and pickoff attempt rules. Is changing a delivery that's working a big deal, or is this nothing and we should expect 2022 Kevin Gausman right out of the gate?
I don't anticipate it'll be a huge problem for Kevin Gausman because he's been making adjustments his entire career.
Right.
Like, this has been his thing. Remember, he was kind of a late career breakout guy. He was DFA'd, non-tendered, like not that long ago in his career. Like, so he's a guy who's had to reinvent himself a few times. So I really don't anticipate it being a huge issue for him. We'll see. I'm sure he's not happy about it because he's found something that works and that allows him to pitch as like a Cy Young caliber dude. Now he has to kind of change it, but at least it is like a pre-pitch habit, right? It's kind of like that bouncing toe tapping thing. And he was cognizant last year of having to come to that like full body stop. And you do that so that the pitch timer, the person in the press box who is actually working the pitch clock, knows that there's a clear delineation of when you start your windup. So when you start your windup, pitch clock is irrelevant. So as soon as you start your windup, it stops. And then you can do all you want, right? Like you can do your like Nestor Cortez stuff, your Marcus Stroman stuff, right? Where you stand up on one leg and you lean back and lean forward, like Johnny Cueto stuff.
Right. The Cueto, yeah.
All that's fair game, right? The pitch clock stops once you lift up that front leg, but there has to be a clear full body stop in order for the timer to know to stop the pitch clock. So I think that I don't think it'll be a massive adjustment for him. It will be one, but if there's somebody who can make that adjustment, I think it's Kevin Gausman.
Okay, so last question before we go to listener questions here for you, Arden. Obviously, there's a little bit of concern amongst the fan base about the fourth outfield position. And I mean, I think part of it is because we did watch Raimel Tapia get almost everyday playing time in that position last year. Is Whit Merrifield or Kevin Biggio going to do the trick in that role? Or in your opinion, could we still see this front office make a move?
They are the de facto fourth outfielder right now, Biggio / Merrifield. And I think you'll see Biggio get more time in right and Merrifield more time in left. The nice thing about having three center fielders essentially in Varsho, Kiermaier and Springer is that there's a lot of potential alignments and there's a lot of versatility. So you can really match up effectively against the pitching staff that you're likely to see on that given night. And that's not only like the starter that you're going to see, but that's also like the bullpen weapons that you're going to see later in the game. So who are you going to want on your bench to counter those? And so the ability of like George Springer to shift over from right and play center, or Varsho to shift over from left and play center. So, you can fit Merrifield in left, or if you want Biggio in the lineup against a righty who maybe isn't consistent with the strike zone, so that utilizes Biggio's pitch recognition skills, you can get him in right. Maybe Springer's playing center on this day and Kiermaier's not in there, etc. Like there's a lot of different configurations. So that's how things stand right now. There's the possibility of an Addison Barger working his way onto this roster, and he could factor into that mix as well. And Nathan Lucas could be involved there. He had a really sound year last year at AAA, not a ton of power, but a guy who was pretty productive offensively and really understands his game and what he needs to do to contribute to a ball club and help it win. So he's an option. And then look, the Blue Jays are going to free up 2 40-man spots at some point when they move Hyun Jin Ryu and Chad Green to the 60-day IL. And towards the end of spring training, there are always people ending up on waivers that are interesting, or there are always teams looking to make trades. So they don't have to end up DFAing somebody and they return a little bit of value on someone, like we saw it last year with Zach Collins and with Bradley Zimmer. There's always roster movement towards the end of spring training. So I'm sure the Blue Jays are going to be active there and looking to see if maybe there's a possibility of bringing in another outfielder towards the end of spring training who starts the year on the 26-man roster.
Arden, you're always so generous with your time. We really appreciate it here. We are going to flip to listener questions and get to as many of those as we can before we let you go. I'll let Adam do most of this. I will start with this first one here from Dr. Internet, of course, Blue Jays Twitter darling and Patreon member here on the walk-off. He says, "Hi, Arden, big fan of your work on the Toronto Blue Jays baseball broadcast on Sportsnet, in addition to your podcast at The Letters with Ben Nicholson-Smith, sponsored by Miller Lite Canada. Are you ever burdened with hearing baseball trade-related rumors that you are unable to report on? If so, you are welcome to unburden yourself by sharing rumors by direct messaging Twitter account at Grecian5. Thank you, Arden, and keep up the terrific work." So,
okay. Thank you.
Yes, there you go.
Into advisement.
There you go. All right, you can clear your conscience there. All right, next one. Next one, first one. I don't know how we want to deal with that, but this one comes in from Bob Emke. Says, "Hello, Arden. First off, truly enjoy your knowledge in the Blue Jays organization. Question: how does Don Mattingly help out the team this year? Does he take over at some point, or do you see this being John Schneider's job for good?"
Does he take over as manager?
I guess that's the question.
I mean, John Schneider just became the manager.
All right.
No,
Okay.
yeah, Don Mattingly is the bench coach, so I mean, he's going to help out in all kinds of ways. You saw him sort of, giving Vladimir Guerrero Jr. some pointers at first base. Like that's going to be huge. Not a lot of better people to learn from about the ins and outs playing first base than Donnie Baseball. I think he's gonna have a lot to say in terms of strategy and game planning and in-game decision making, and just relying on some of his experience and some of the situations that he's managed his way throughout his MLB managerial tenure. But yeah, no, I don't think he's going to be the manager of the Toronto Blue Jays this year. I think John Schneider is going to be the manager, and I think he's a good one.
I think so too. I do think that it'd be some valuable brain picking going on between John Schneider, though, and Don Mattingly. So look forward to that. Okay, next one comes in from Michael Meyer. It says, "I would like to hear your take on how your and Ben's perspective and philosophy on baseball are different. Also wanted to congratulate you on moving up with Sportsnet." There you go, Michael Meyer.
Thanks, man. I don't know. How are our philosophies different? I don't know how to answer that. Honestly, I have no idea.
All right, that's a tough one.
Yeah, it's just not something I've ever considered. Like we both come to the podcast and talk about the Blue Jays, man. Like, yeah, I don't. I wish I had some sort of really insightful thought to give about that, but I honestly just really don't. I'm drawing blanks.
Fair enough. All right. Next one comes from Randy Levy. Says, "What topic, player, or story does Arden want to cover but hasn't had a chance to yet?"
Zero. None. I mean, we talk about this team all day long. Right?
You're
Like,
absolutely fulfilled.
Honestly, we talk every day throughout the season. We talk about them and we write about them. So there's really like no stone left unturned. It's as far as I'm concerned with the Toronto Blue Jays. Like I think we cover everything.
Oh, especially in some of those cold, dark January nights. There's you gotta sometimes uncover some pretty boring stones just to keep the ball rolling. So I get that. Okay. Next one comes in from Mal Polliter. Says, "Since Vlad has moved to first base, he's dropped a lot of weight and seems to embrace the many facets of a healthy pro athlete lifestyle. His admitted dream was always to play third base, and I'm curious if you can envision a scenario where Chapman departs and Vlad slides back over to third, where his cannon of an arm isn't entirely wasted. He may never be a defensive wizard like Chapman, but with his new level of fitness, I feel like he could be an above average third baseman."
I mean, he's a gold glover at first base, so I don't know that you're really gonna mess around with that. I think you've got him at the right position right now. People forget that he came up as an outfielder, by the way, in the Dominican Republic when he was signed internationally. He was signed as an outfielder, and then Alex Anthopoulos and Tony LaCava and those guys were asking him like, "Hey, where do you want to play? Where do you like playing?" And Vlad goes, "Yeah, I kind of like playing third base." I said, "Okay, you can play third base." So he played third base coming up through the minors, and yeah, he's got an absolute cannon. You don't get to see it as often anymore, but since he's made the move across the diamond, he seems to have like really settled in as a very sound defensive first baseman. So I would be leaving him right where he is if it were up
Don't
to
mess
me.
with what works, eh?
Yeah, I mean, there might be, the odd game where you get some crazy substitutions and, pinch hitting and stuff like that necessitates him to have a few innings at third base. It's still an option, but yeah, I think Vlad's pretty settled at first.
That Gold Glove award, I'm sure, really puts his mind at ease with that transition from third base as well.
Yeah.
All right. Last one here comes from John Dick. In regards to the bearded dragon, this is Kikuchi, the new beard in spring training here. So in my opinion, Kikuchi is a very interesting wild card for the team. For all intents and purposes, his quote unquote stuff is very good. What sort of ceiling do you see with the bearded dragon, And do you think he's more or less likely to be an impact arm this year?
Best case scenario, he's taken regular turns in the rotation and given you 2 really sound trips through with a high strikeout rate and an acceptable walk rate, I think. And then, beyond that, like, you'll take that if
Yeah.
you're the Blue Jays. There is always the sort of fallback alternative of him as like Andrew Miller out of the bullpen as this lefty reliever, and we saw him strike out 40% of the batters that he faced as a reliever last season. So like the stuff plays in that role, but he was still just walking too many hitters. So the biggest thing you need to keep an eye on with Yusei Kikuchi as he starts making spring starts and then into his first regular season outings is just like, how often is he in the zone? Like, how often is the stuff on the plate? Because that's the biggest thing for him. He's got no problem missing bats. Like, he's got no problem finding velocity. He's obviously doing a lot of work right now to sort of like adjust his arm path and shorten ups, try to be more direct to the catcher. He's kind of playing around with his pitches, working on a curveball, changing grips, all that stuff. Like, look, there was a lot of tinkering in the season last year too, right? There's a lot of adjustments being made too. I think the biggest thing is he trusting his stuff and is he throwing strikes? Because typically when he's attacking the zone and being aggressive with his fastball, good things happen. So I'm keeping an eye on that zone percentage with Yusei Kikuchi. I think that's the biggest thing.
Love it. Okay, that's all we got for listener questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Arden. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us, man. All the best with the upcoming season. Safe travels down to spring training at the end of the week here. And again, congrats on the new role down on the field. Very excited to see you doing interviews.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Hey, here's one last question.
Yep.
With your new role, will you be traveling with the team more? Home games, or you do away games too?
Yeah, I'll be doing quite a bit of travel. I guess it's probably more than the last few years. It's kind of different, right? Like, it's going to be less travel for like the .ca coverage and more travel for the broadcast. So I think it all kind of evens out.
Evens out.
Yeah. In that regard, then, do you travel with the team? I know Sportsnet, Blue Jays, it's all like an integrated conglomeration. Are you traveling separately, or are you like team playing with the Blue Jays?
Flying commercial, baby.
There you go. Just a regular Joe.
People see me in that line at Air Canada at 6:30 in the morning or whatever. I'm there.
I love it.
I'm in line at Starbucks at Pearson very often. So yeah,
right.
we fly commercial, and it that adds a little bit of stress and decreases a little bit from the time spent sleeping, but I'll take that because the job's a lot of fun.
Waiting for Zone 3 to be called with the rest of us schlubs, eh?
Oh yeah, exactly. I know that call well.
All right. Again, Arden, thank you so much, man. All the best.
All right, thanks, guys.